All right, good morning and welcome back to Daybreak. Of course, you're watching the show that brings what you need to think about as we begin the day. And after that very heated political discussion with women, some of them politicians, others are commentators in different matters. We now want to take a look at what is pretty important in terms of affecting the young people of this country. We're here to speak to the chairperson or the outgoing, or is it the former? Outgoing chairperson of the Youth Entreprise Development Fund, Ronnie Osumba. Karibu sana to the show.
Thank you, Gituku. Asante.
Yes, and before we do that, of course, we understand that the term for the Youth Fund Board of Directors has come to an end. For him, it expired on the 23rd of June 2019. That was on Sunday. But there have been several things they have been able to do, and some of them what people think have not been successful stories. Let's take a look at what you've been saying when we invited you to speak about this on your Youth Fund story. If you can take a look at what you've been saying on social media. Or this is Sizzler Ras Munyewe says that our group benefited 3 times. In fact, we were planning to apply for another loan in July. I wonder whether we shall get it. Of course, that's a concern from a beneficiary. They don't know whether they will get another award. Gabriel Masharia, unfortunately, we are coming to know the guy when he's exiting. That alone can tell the Kenyan youths a lot that they didn't know you. How come? It's been 3 years. This is on Facebook. Edwin Maina, sadly, haijasaidia sana. And I wonder why it should wind up for something else, yet it hasn't fulfilled its purposes. So, of course, there's that story that it will be transitioning to Biashara Kenya Fund. Yusuf Sharma, you say, hizi pesa huwa hazifiki mtaani kwa youth, inazeeka tu kwa mifuko ya wazee. I don't know how true that is. That hazifiki kwa vijana. Then Kirogo Gachoki says that let the beneficiaries showcase what they got. It would have helped by paying our outstanding help loans. Really, you take a youth fund loan to go and pay for your help. Finally, for now, this is Don Rambo says that I applied for those loans in vain until now, and I'm no longer a youth. I know it was meant for some political bigwigs. So that's generally. Oh, okay, there's another one. All right, this is who? Robert Mwangi says that for those who are complaining that they have never seen this money from Youth Fund, neither benefited from the money, have you ever applied for them? You expected Youth Fund to knock on your doors and help you out? Form groups in your county and go ahead and apply for the loans. You'll get them. I'm speaking out of experience, having benefited from this. Of course, very varied views in as far as the Youth Enterprises Development Fund is concerned. And it's been 12 years, and I was looking at your report. You're saying that 12.8 billion shillings is what has been issued in terms of loans to more than 1,130,000 young people. But there's still people who feel that they have not seen its impact. So, how do you rate it? Obvious into giving loans and supporting young people.
Gituku, thank you for having me and thank you for having this very important conversation. Of course, we appreciate the concerns and the frustrations of many young people out there, and the perception that the fund is meant for some and not for others. The perception that that our activities are largely in Nairobi, and I appreciate that because. We have a certain pot which we need to work with, and this pot, like Robert has said at the end of those comments, those people who have taken the effort and applied have had varied results, but majority of them have access to the fund. I mean, last year alone, and I will tell you this year, ending June to the end of this month, we are hitting 109,000 youth who have applied and successfully received financing. We are not going, obviously, to support everybody, right? Because, one, we have a limited fund, right? So every year we have run out of money. In fact, this is the first year. We are finishing with money still in the pot. This is the first year. We are finishing with money in the pot.
What's the size of your kitty currently?
Well, the size of the kit is 3.7 billion, but remember it is revolving. Every year we get, in the last 3 years, consistently about 330 million additional financing from government to lend out to young people. Every year we are lending an average now of about 600 million. Okay, and we have a lot of success stories,
right?
Mostly around supporting young people in groups. So about 50% of the portfolio is actually financing for youth groups. But the other 50% is for supporting registered limited companies and individuals.
Right.
Yes.
All right. So even as you talk about, I mean, 12 years, 12.8 billion shillings benefiting, so far it's 1.1 million. So it's an average of 100,000 young people every year. Has this been the answer to the challenges the young people are facing in 2006, 2007? Do you feel like it has responded to that call?
I don't think there's one single answer to addressing unemployment in Kenya. But this is definitely an answer for those young people who have chosen to go into entrepreneurship. Remember, the government's effort in setting up these affirmative funds is not necessarily to reach out to all youth, but it is to reach out to youth who are at the bottom of the pyramid. Young people who are just out of school, who are just starting off business, who generally would not have access to commercial facilities.
Right.
So the effort is there, and we have seen progress, but it is definitely not enough. Because of course we are dealing with a limited resource, which is money. If I was to be given 50 billion Kenya shillings, perhaps we could reach out to more and we could have a greater impact. But with the limited resources that we have, we are doing the best that we can.
But when you look at the impact and the sustainability of what that impact is, so yes, you have issued loans to some youth groups or maybe some registered companies. Can you still vouch for those groups that are benefited? Are they sustainable as we speak now?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we have seen many youth groups which have started as a youth group, gone into, say, small-scale farming, and have progressed and grown into big businesses that have registered and are now no longer in requirement of our services. So we have seen that happening. But we have also seen groups which have come, and because of the social dynamics of the youth, youth is transitory. So many of them come together because, they have just come out of school, they do not have employment, but sooner than later, some of them starting getting jobs, some start migrating because they want to go and get married, some get opportunities for further education, and therefore we see a lot of the social dynamics within groups affect their businesses, because when these movements begin, then maybe the brainchild of the business, for example, has gotten an opportunity to go to the US for further education, and therefore the groups then collapse. So one of our primary concerns has been, how do we then improve on the group dynamics? And the answer to that going forward needs to be that we need to formalize youth groups so that they are not an informal coming together, but they have an obligation towards each other, but also towards the business. So setting up some form of legal framework around those groups.
I'm asking that because if you say that you have trained 508,000 youth in entrepreneurship, and also you have helped some 10,700 youth to market their products both locally and internationally, an economy should be in a position to feel that impact. Do we feel it?
I think we do. I think it is measurable in the sense that the output that these young people have, once they have been trained and once they are able to go into a formal business. And for example, by the way, it does not necessarily mean that you come to Youth Fund for financing. Some people come to Youth Fund, for example, for what you've just rightfully said there, market linkage. It's not that they lack in financing. What they lack in is access to a market. And that's, one of the interventions that we have. But I think the impact that we're having is measurable. The success stories are many. You have Maxwell Okoth, for example, who's a doctor who started off with a loan of 1.2 million 4 or 5 years ago. And today, Maxwell is running a 150-bed hospital in Roy Family Hospital, where he has invested 300 million of his own money. So this is a guy who has transitioned from borrowing 1 million from the Youth Fund to self-financing a 300 million project. He has opened branches in Tala, in Machakos, in Migori. Therefore, we can pick out those people who have come.
A few success stories.
Exactly.
Okay, so then when you were coming in, of course, Youth Fund had quite a tainted image. That's the time that there was the case of 180 million shillings that was stolen from the fund. Of course, you remember that during that time, the chairperson is the late Bruce Odhiambo and the chief executive officer, the late Catherine Namuye. I don't know how much of progress has been made in as far as prosecuting that case, and whether there has been any recovery of the resources and getting back to the Youth Fund?
And God rest their souls in peace. In terms of recovery of the funds that were lost at the time, of course, this is an active court case. Unfortunately, with the passing of the two, the court case was significantly affected. But the assets recovery has also kicked in. And I think as of end of last year, they had reported that they had recovered about 60 million. 60 million. But remember, this money, when it is recovered, is taken to Treasury for reallocation. So we do not necessarily get it back directly, unless Treasury then decides to repatriate it to us. However, I think we have come from a good place. And indeed, you are very right that when we got there in 2016, about the same time, June of 2016, we found a very dire situation. You know, the place was a hole. It was just, it was a boat that had too many holes, therefore was leaking and was gonna easily sink. But we have put in place measures, a lot of reforms, starting with people, because an institution is as good as its people. And therefore, we went through a restructuring program. We weeded out the chaff. We started off with, you know, and sometimes I get criticized for this, we started off with about 404 employees. Today, we have 220. 220. So we've made the organization leaner, but we've made it more efficient. By reinvesting in, you know, re-engineering processes, investing in new systems. So we have digitized our systems today. So we have reduced the turnaround time of loan applications from, it used to be even up to 6 months, 8 months. Today we are doing about a month. And we have seen, you know, even the confidence of the staff picking up, the confidence of the youth dealing with us picking up. But what is more significant is that when you are able to attract private sector to the table, then you know that you have, you know, fixed the image. All right,
I'll get back to that shortly, but I just want to take a look at what you've been saying on Twitter. For instance, Alex Nyamboga is saying that they come up, this is based on the question that we asked you of your youth fund experience. Alex Nyamboga says that they come up with policies that are strict so that they can discourage the youth from seeking for the loans to start their own businesses. Hence, the money ends up with the wrong people. Corruption is not at its roots, but it's sprouting at diversified rates. And I want to use that to come up to the question that despite the, apart from the 180 million shillings scandal that we heard of before you joined the fund, there was the story, was this sometimes last year, of some 10 million shillings that was paid to 4 youth groups, and there was some 7 officials that were suspended. Are they back in the office? What's the progress in that investigation?
2 of the officials are back in office. One of them went to court and got reinstated. The other one was cleared of any offense. But, you know, the issue of loss of funds, sometimes it's a very, you know, what is loss? Okay, so this particular case of 10 million shillings was actually not misappropriation in the sense of, you know, somebody putting their hands in the kitty. It was a collusion between our staff and young people. And this is something that happened, by the way, in 2015-2016 financial year, before we got there. And those are some of the loopholes that we've now you know, cut out. But that particular case was a collusion between our staff and young people. We prosecuted the facts that we got from those particular cases. 4 youth groups were found to have been culpable. So these are youth groups. Yes. These are not even my staff. 4 youth groups were found to be culpable. All youth groups have committed in writing to repay the amounts and have started actually making the payments. The staff who are implicated, as you have already rightfully mentioned, were sent away. So I think that was a single case an outlier case that we dealt with, and we have closed those loopholes.
You may have closed on that, but when you say that 4 youth groups benefited and now they have committed to repay, that's okay in terms of accountability of their resources, but you are certain that when that kind of situation happens, then it denies rightful young people from accessing such kind of resources. So in terms of moving forward, what internal control systems have you put in place to ensure that such cases do not occur again between your staff and the young people?
So first and foremost, like I had already alluded to, is that we have invested in digitizing the entire processes. So one of the loopholes that used to be used was that a lot of processes, when we got to the youth fund, were very manual. And therefore, when it comes to manual processes, you can have human intervention, obviously, to divert funds. But today, all processes are transparent. Everybody who handles the systems are accountable, and therefore we have system audits and system trails of anybody who is in the process of approving disbursements of facilities. So today it is much harder to beat the system because if you pick that particular case, for example, it was a case of an officer, using youth groups to apply for 500,000 shillings several times. So, one youth group, for example, got 500,000 shillings 4 times, which means 2 million. Where a system is manual, this officer can easily delete an old data so that they can be able to be approved. But today you cannot be able to do that. So we believe that with the systems that we have put in place, with the controls, with the policies. By the way, we also did not have a watertight credit lending policy. Today we have that in place. It is that much harder to beat the system.
All right, I want us now to focus more on the transition processes of this fund, because yes, you're exiting, so a new board will have to be appointed. I don't know whether it will be or it will have to wait for Biashara Kenya Fund.
Indeed.
But whatever the case happens, because it's not within your power. So if really Youth Fund, Uwezo Fund and Women Enterprises Fund are collapsed into one group, Biashara Kenya Fund, how have you prepared the institution for the transition?
I think one of the things that we have been doing in the last 1.5 years is preparing the organization for a transition. And the transition was going to be, one, if we remain as Youth Fund, we need to be future ready. So it is taking in all these concerns that we're hearing from youth and re-engineering the institution so that it can be more accessible, so that it can be more efficient, and we can reach youth who generally, we call them youth who are in hard-to-reach places. So that was one thing we have been preparing for, and I think we are ready for that. But the more likely transition is towards Biashara Kenya Fund.
Right. And so you have a staff size of 220 youth here. Uwezo Fund would have their own staff. Women Enterprise Development Fund would have their own staff. So how do you collapse all this into one and secure the jobs of those who are working for the different institutions?
So the Biashara Kenya Fund transition has been about 1.5 years in progress. It started off in December 2017 with a task force being set up, established by the National Treasury to look at all these things. And all these experts who are put in a room for several months, looked at all these transition issues. So, whether it is staff, whether it is assets, including our customers. How do you bring, the youth portfolio and the women portfolio together? Because that in itself is a challenge, right? But also beginning June last year, the designated fund administrator, who is the PS of Gender, also established a transition team, so a project management team. And this project management team has been working now on the operational detail of transition.
Right.
Of course, I cannot get into the details of the same, but let me just put it this way, that we have looked at every consideration. We have looked at how we bring our staff together without necessarily losing any. And the CS, Professor Kobia has been very clear that we must not lose any. So even as we structure the Biashara Kenya Fund,
that would be so much workforce for an institution.
Well, precisely. But as we structure the fund to be efficient, we will of course determine the optimum level, staff levels. But the extra staff are then going to be absorbed into other public service roles. So I think all these things have been thought through. We are just waiting actually now for a rollout.
Do you know how much of money that you've lent out that is still outstanding?
Yes, we have about 1.5 billion.
1.5 billion from which year? And what do you
remember
consider?
Remember this is a revolving fund. Okay, so when you talk about a revolving fund, technically you don't have any money in the kitty.
No, that's right.
All money is out
but
at
you
any one time.
You have a repayment window that you must.
So you have a repayment window. So this is the 1.5 billion I'm talking about is money that has fallen due. So even if you were lent 3 months ago, it's now due.
Yes.
Okay, so that's an outstanding amount. So it's 1.5 billion.
So the next question is about how much do you consider as bad debt or the repayment success vis-a-vis the bad debts?
We inherited a very toxic portfolio in the sense that the very early loans that were lent out to young people were not being repaid at the rate that we wanted. So we found a repayment rate of 58%, which means for every 100 shillings out there, only 58 shillings was coming back.
Right.
Today we have been able to improve that to about 88%.
88%.
88%. But 88% is on average. The portfolio in the last 3 years is at about 96% repayment, which is as good as, you know, a bank, you know, a commercial bank out there. The bad portfolio today, I would put it at about 20%. 20% of the total portfolio.
Bad portfolio. And so when you look at the young people who are not able to pay their, to repay their loans, what do you think, what do you find as the main challenge that they are facing? Is it just bad habit or is it collapsing of businesses?
So it's two things. One is just it's bad habit. You know, the first facilities that were lent out. Remember, this fund was set up on an election year in 2007. So the first funds that were lent out were considered political money, with no obligation to repay. But this bad manners continued for quite a while. We have now stopped that, and we're saying we are onboarding only good loans. But even for the good loans, you will find that two things come into play. One is the social dynamics I talked about earlier, that, you know, group imesambaratika, everybody has gone their own different ways, so they've ignored the business, or just...
And how do you catch up with them?
Oh, we look for them.
Have you?
Oh, we look for them. Because this is public money, and we are responsible for ensuring, you know, tomorrow people will come and tell me, Chairman, why has the fund, well, not tomorrow because now I'm gone, but, you know, the parliament can still summon me. But they will ask me, did we give you 5 billion and today you have only 2 billion? All right, so it is public money. We have to get this money repaid. We try to use non-conventional means. Therefore, we do not auction. Actually, we do not auction young people, but we use county administration. We use the group dynamics in itself has helped us a lot, because if Ronnie and Gituku are in a group and Ronnie is the one who's not meeting his end of the bargain, we will look for Gituku and say, you co-guaranteed this guy.
And so as you exit the stage, for Biashara Kenya to be successful, what do you think you need to do to ensure that the bad habits are not transitioned to Biashara Kenya, so that you have that pressure that you have to repay that loan? You cannot play such kind of gimmicks with the banks.
No, you can't. And this is precisely, in fact, you've just nailed it. We need to, you know, inculcate a certain discipline in our young people. Now, by the way, in contrast, the Women Fund has a very good repayment rate, because women generally understand that singular philosophy of borrowing. You must pay, right? Okay. You must pay because you want to access it tomorrow, but also because you want somebody else to access it. And this is the discipline that we need to inculcate amongst our young people and in their businesses.
Okay, I want us to take a look at some of the feedback that you've been sharing with us on Twitter, Citizen TV Kenya, as well as on SMS line 22422. If you can begin with what we have. This is Kelly Care. Yes, there has been impact from the Youth Fund Kenya. The default rate of the loan has been high. Does this communicate something? If so, what are the interventions so far? Is talking about the default rate, what we just from talking about on Twitter. You're also saying that this is Ahmed Hamisi, that in case as an individual I have business idea, can I benefit from the funds, or must I be in a group? Individuals versus a group. You respond to that in closing, as well as Suba's finest. Youth Fund was selectively made available either by non-committed staff at the constituency level or by the incompetent supervision by the ministry in charge. A case in point is Kajiado North. Application made in February 2018 is still reported to be under the process. Why does it take so long to process loan applications? Ben Kabogo is saying that the Youth Fund is a good idea and can uplift the lives of many young people, but it's not well executed in the Mashinani. Like in Limuru, we don't have a Youth Fund officer and nothing goes on regarding Youth Fund. So, on SMS, you are saying that you don't leave your name. I applied for a loan last year, June, till now, yet no positive results. June last year to now. The other one was February 2018, no response. And then comment from Eldoret: in future, those managing the funds meant to assist the vulnerable in the society, including the youth, should be keenly vetted. Much of the money finds itself in the hands of crooks as managers. No wonder the president had to appoint former Vice President Mudi Awori to manage one of the funds. All right, so that's what Kenyans are saying, but I take keen interest in what they're saying of a very slow consideration and approval of loan applications.
Yes, so we have a number of those cases for various reasons. Let me start with the first, most common one, is that a loan application needs to be complete in its totality for it to go through the process. Now, many times we find young people who are told, you know, this is the application form, bring these 8 things, they bring 4. We will not start processing that application. And then they disappear for a month. And then they come back and they ask what people say. And we say, no, but you didn't bring the other 4. They say, okay, I'll go and bring. They take another 1 month. They bring 2. Okay, so it is the completion of the application process that sometimes then hinders us progressing with an application. But secondly, like I have said, we have been going through a transition. And one of the transitions was the implementation of the new loan processing system, which started off, I think, mid last year, and we concluded in April this year. Okay, now this caught out some people, because maybe you had just submitted your form, but you are now required to start off a new process, a fresh process that would meet the requirements of the new system. And, you know, some youth then, you know, just didn't turn up, or they got caught up in the system. But these are not many cases. And I would be quite happy if, you know, even as I retire from my position, to get some of these cases so that we can forward to the fund.
But of course, you see some of the people, they are saying that they cannot access these officers at the constituency level. I don't know, how much have you done in terms of decentralizing the fund to the counties and constituencies?
Yes, so the original structure that we found was that we had a youth officer in every constituency, but most of these youth officers, because of lack of resources again, most of these officers were, you know, either on short contracts or things like that. So we restructured the entire organization, and today our focus is at county level. Right, so we are operating from county level, but at every county we have about 3 or 4 officers.
But that's disadvantageous. For instance, if you're in Kajiado County, the headquarters in Kajiado, and then you are coming from Oloitoktok, which is very far, how do you access these funds?
So our officers go to the ground. Now, you must appreciate that we cannot have 280 officers across the country. It's too big, quite inefficient, too expensive. We cannot be able to afford that. But for us to be able to provide better services, and, you know, the focus today is on devolving service to the county level. We have ensured that at every county, we have an office, and we have at least 3 or 4 officers who actually go to the sub-counties on rotation.
Finally, one says whether a group or an individual to access the funds, what is the minimum for each category?
The minimum number of people?
No, the minimum funds that you can access in terms of
100,000. So
for an individual group?
For both. We found that the minimum at some point was 50,000 shillings. And a lot of the feedback we got from young people was that 50,000 shillings was not sufficient. And therefore we increased the value to about 100,000 shillings. So today you can be able to access money, 100,000 shillings to 5 million shillings.
5 million shillings. All right, Ronnie Osumba, the outgoing chairperson of the Youth Enterprise Development Fund. We wish you well. I don't know what you do after this. Are you running for politics?
Oh, no. This is we must bust that myth that once you've served in public service, you have to go and run for
okay, I ask you that because once upon a time you were running it for the office of the presidency, but that's our time on daybreak in terms of that interview with the Youth Enterprise Development Fund chairperson, outgoing chairperson Ronnie Osumba. You can follow him on Twitter and have further conversations in as far as the questions that you may have. So up next is Engage. Willis Raburu will be coming on board with his panelists. They'll be talking about what are they talking about? Situationships and what else? Come we stay. I don't know what those are, so Willis will tell us what they are. Back in a moment.